Hello, and welcome back to History to Relax. I'm so glad you're here. This channel is a space where we explore the long, winding story of our world in a calm and gentle way, helping you drift into rest while still learning something profound. Tonight, I'll be your guide once again. In this series, we will journey into the far future to imagine how humanity itself might one day come to an end. Each chapter paints a different possibility, all grounded in science and history, but told slowly, softly, like a bedtime meditation. It's not a story of fear, but of reflection, a way to place our short lives into the vastness of time and the patient rhythm of the earth. If you enjoy these journeys, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every little gesture helps this community grow, and it lets me know what kind of stories help you relax the most. Now, wherever you are, I invite you to settle in. Dim the lights, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let go of the day behind you. Sit back, relax, and allow the story to unfold. Our journey begins now. Part 1. A Fragile Beginning. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the Earth, turning quietly in space. From above, our planet looks peaceful. Swirls of white clouds trace across oceans that shimmer in blues and greens. Land stretches in shapes that have shifted over deep time, carved by rivers, mountains, winds, and ice. Against this ancient backdrop, human beings are only a recent arrival. For billions of years, the Earth spun without us. For most of its history, the continents knew nothing of our steps, and the skies never heard the sound of our voices. Humanity's story began only a few 100,000 years ago. In geological time, that is almost nothing. Dinosaurs ruled for more than 100 million years. Ancient forests grew and crumbled long before we discovered fire. Civilizations as we know them have existed for less than 6,000 years. Yet in that brief period, we have left marks visible from space. Our cities shine at night, our roads carve straight lines across valleys, and our fields form geometric patterns where wild landscapes once spread. It is easy to feel permanent when we stand in the middle of a bustling metropolis or look at the monuments left behind by those who came before us. But permanence is an illusion. Every species that has lived on Earth has eventually disappeared. Extinction is not an exception but the rule. More than 99% of all organisms that ever existed are now gone, replaced by new forms or erased entirely. Humanity, despite our intelligence and ambition, belongs to the same fragile pattern. To imagine our end is not to invite despair, but to recognize our place in a much larger story. Think of our history as a candle flame. It glows brightly, flickering against the darkness, but the wax and wick are finite. The flame burns for a while, long enough to give light, before it fades. Humanity's light has burned brighter in the last few centuries than ever before. Our population has grown from millions to billions. Our inventions connect us across oceans and skies. We have split the atom, stepped on the moon, and decoded the building blocks of life. Yet each advancement also deepens our entanglement with forces larger than ourselves. In this journey, we will travel forward through imagined centuries and millennia, guided by science and reason, to explore how our flame might eventually go out. But before we enter those visions of endings, we begin with reflection. Part 1 is not about disaster but about perspective, about remembering how brief and delicate human history is, and how easily it might be swept away in the immense tides of time. Consider the origins of our species. The first humans lived in small groups, moving across savannas, following game, and gathering fruits and roots. The world then was already ancient beyond comprehension. Oceans had formed 3 billion years earlier. Mountains had risen and crumbled many times. Entire lineages of animals had flourished and vanished. And yet in those early days of humanity, there was no hint that one species of primate would one day build satellites and cities. Slowly, with stone tools and fire, our ancestors adapted. They spread into forests, deserts, mountains, and coastlines. By the time ice ages gripped the northern hemisphere, humans had already walked far from their origins in Africa. They crossed land bridges, paddled along coasts, and eventually touched every continent. With each migration came change, languages branching, traditions forming, and identities growing. It is easy to feel that our dominance now was inevitable, but it was not. Other human species once shared this planet with us. Neanderthals thrived in Europe. Denisovans wandered through Asia. Smaller beings like Homo floresiensis lived on islands. All of them disappeared. We do not know their final moments, but their absence reminds us that survival is never guaranteed. We are the last branch standing on a once crowded tree. As civilizations arose, the pace of change accelerated. Villages grew from harvests, kingdoms from villages, and empires from kingdoms. With writing came memory beyond generations. With metal tools came conquest and construction. With trade came connection across oceans. All of this unfolded in what is, to the earth, less than the blink of an eye. In a mere 10,000 years, humanity transformed landscapes, rivers, and skies. We became a geological force, leaving behind layers of plastic, steel, and concrete that will remain long after we are gone. Yet beneath our achievements lies fragility. A volcanic eruption can disrupt the climate. A virus invisible to the eye can sweep through cities. A shift in rainfall can undo entire civilizations, as it once did in Mesopotamia and the Maya lowlands. Even the most powerful empire has always lived under the shadow of forces larger than itself. This fragility is what we must keep in mind as we imagine the end of humans on Earth. It is not to fear, but to understand. The Earth is vast and enduring. It has outlived continents, oceans, and entire classes of creatures. Our presence, however dazzling in the moment, is only temporary. Picture yourself standing in a great library, with shelves stretching beyond sight. Each shelf holds the story of a species. Some volumes are thick, filled with millions of years. Others are thin, barely more than a few pages. Humanity's book is fuller than many, but it is not endless. When our final chapter comes, the library will continue to grow without us. From another perspective, imagine time as an ocean. The waves crash against the shore endlessly, wearing down cliffs and carrying grains of sand. Civilizations rise like castles built on the sand, intricate and proud, but eventually each is washed away. The ocean remains. The tide moves on. Humanity's castles are vast and glittering, but they too will meet the tide. Why begin with such reflections? Because to explore the end of humans is not only to look forward, but to ground ourselves in humility. We are not outside of nature. We are not beyond the rules that shaped trilobites, mammoths, or ammonites. We are part of the same story. Our cleverness has carried us far, but cleverness does not grant eternity. And so, in this first part, the invitation is simple. Breathe deeply and imagine our world not as it feels today, but as it will appear to the eyes of the distant future. Imagine cities covered in moss, forests spreading across highways, and the stars shining down on an earth without us. It is not a vision of terror but of change, the kind that has always come, whether we were here to see it or not. In the coming parts, we will walk through different possible futures: pandemics, changing climates, cosmic collisions, and faraway suns. Each is rooted in scientific possibility, each a reminder of how delicate our flame is. But before we enter those futures, let us linger here, in the present moment, aware of the miracle that is our existence. We are fragile, yes, but in our fragility lies beauty. We are temporary, but within that brevity lies meaning. The end of humans on Earth will come one day, but for now, the candle burns, and its light is ours to cherish. Part 2. The Silent Fever. Imagine a quiet morning in a great city. The sun rises, painting rooftops in gold. Streets are lined with towers of glass and steel. Cars wait at lights, trains hum beneath the surface, and millions of voices fill the air. It feels alive, unshakable, permanent. Yet history whispers otherwise. Civilizations have always risen with confidence and fallen in silence. And sometimes, the silence has been brought not by armies or storms, but by something so small it cannot be seen with the naked eye. Pandemics have shaped human destiny before. Long before antibiotics, before microscopes revealed hidden worlds, entire societies were humbled by invisible invaders. The Black Death swept across medieval Europe, ending nearly half of all lives in some regions. Smallpox traveled with explorers and conquerors, decimating indigenous populations in the Americas. The influenza of 1918 circled the globe with terrifying speed, striking down young and old alike. These moments remind us that our bodies are never fully secure, that our numbers and confidence can collapse with shocking swiftness. To imagine a future pandemic is to imagine a world where our defenses fail. Despite modern medicine and global cooperation, the possibility remains. Viruses mutate. Bacteria adapt. In laboratories and markets, in forests and thawing ice, countless organisms wait in silence. Some are harmless, but some carry within them the potential to spread like fire across dry grass. Picture it beginning quietly. A cough in a remote village, a fever in a crowded market, a cluster of cases in a city where planes come and go every hour. In the early days, there is confusion. Doctors compare notes. News trickles out, cautious and uncertain. Governments weigh the cost of alarm. People go on with their routines, unaware that something new has already begun to ripple through the web of human connection. As days pass, numbers rise. Hospitals fill, then overflow. Masks appear, then become universal. Flights are cancelled, schools close, and storefronts darken. For a while, it feels temporary, as though this wave will pass and life will resume. But in this imagined future, the wave does not pass. The sickness is too efficient, too subtle. It spreads before symptoms show, catching families, co-workers, and strangers on trains. It reaches villages and megacities alike, sparing no continent. The silence grows gradually. Streets once crowded become empty. Parks fill with birdsong instead of children's voices. Factories shut down, their machines still and gathering dust. Skies, once streaked with planes, become clear. For the first time in generations, the world is without its constant human hum. This silence is not dramatic, not a sudden collapse, but a slow fading. Families remain in their homes, caring for one another until care itself is no longer possible. Neighbors check on each other until there are no neighbors left. Entire buildings become mausoleums of quiet. Nature, indifferent, continues. Grass sprouts in cracks of sidewalks. Deer wander cautiously into cities. Birds build nests in traffic lights. With fewer cars, fewer factories, and fewer fires, the air clears, rivers run cleaner, and forests spread. To the earth, the fever is brief. To humans, it is final. Imagine standing on a balcony of an empty tower. The city spreads out below, its lights flickering off one by one as power plants shut down without workers. The sound of wind replaces the murmur of engines. Somewhere a dog barks, unanswered. Above, the stars shine more clearly than they have in centuries, undimmed by smog or artificial glow. It is peaceful, though that peace is built on absence. In the countryside, abandoned villages stand among fields that grow wild. Tractors sit rusting under open skies. Orchards bloom without harvest, their fruits falling to the ground, feeding birds and insects. Forests creep back into spaces once held by crops. Wolves and bears, long driven away, find paths back to familiar lands. Centuries pass in imagination. The buildings weaken. Windows crack. Roofs collapse under weight of rain and snow. Skyscrapers, without maintenance, surrender to gravity. Bridges buckle and tumble into rivers. Roads split as tree roots push through, breaking the once smooth surfaces. What was once human territory becomes a landscape of ruins, softened by moss and lichen. Archaeologists of the future, if any intelligent species should arise after us, may one day walk among these remnants. They might find masks buried in layers of soil, medical supplies fossilized beside bones, and records preserved in data storage or carved stone. They will know that a sickness once swept across this planet and ended the age of humans. But in the silence that follows, Earth itself continues without memory or grief. The story of extinction by pandemic is not the most dramatic ending we can imagine, but it is among the most plausible. It requires no asteroid, no nuclear fire, no cosmic accident. Only the quiet persistence of nature's smallest creatures. 4 billions of years, viruses and bacteria have evolved, adapting to every defense, surviving in every environment. They existed long before us and will remain long after. To think of humanity undone by a fever is sobering. Yet in the calm telling of this possibility lies a reminder. Life is always fragile, always balanced on the edge of forces unseen. The world we take for granted, the markets, the songs, the laughter of children, the gatherings in theaters and stadiums, is woven from threads more delicate than we like to admit. A fever can unravel it. And so, as we continue forward in this series, we carry with us the image of a world hushed by illness. Not in cruelty, not in punishment, but in the impartial unfolding of biology. A reminder that even the smallest hand can shape the largest fate. The candle of humanity burns brightly, but a silent fever could be enough to dim its flame forever. Part 3. The Overheated Sky. Imagine the Earth as a living sphere, wrapped in a thin and fragile veil of air. For thousands of years this delicate blanket has held the warmth of the sun, shielding us from the coldness of space. Within its balance, civilizations flourished. Crops grew in fertile valleys, rivers followed dependable courses, and seasons turned with a rhythm that humans could trust. It was a balance so consistent that entire calendars, religions, and ways of life were built upon it. Yet balance is never permanent. In this imagined future, the veil thickens with gases we once released freely, and the rhythm falters. The sky does not rage at once, nor collapse in a day. Instead, it grows hotter, brighter, and heavier, until the air itself becomes hostile to the species that once depended upon it. Already, in our present, the signs are visible. Summers stretch longer. Winters shrink. Storms gather strength across warmer oceans. Tides creep slowly inland. Yet these are only the first ripples. Imagine centuries beyond this moment, when the carbon we burned has lingered for ages, thickening the atmosphere and trapping more heat than the Earth can release. The world has tipped, and the sky itself has become overheated. The oceans, vast and patient, are the first to change. Their waters expand as they warm. Ice, stored for millennia in glacier and polar sheets, melts into the seas. Shorelines, once mapped and permanent, slip quietly inland. Picture a coastal city, perhaps New York, perhaps Shanghai, perhaps Rio. Its skyline glitters at dusk, towers shining with light. But over the decades the waters climb. Streets once filled with taxis and crowds become canals. Subways flood and never drain. Sandbags and walls delay the inevitable but cannot stop it. In this vision, the process is slow enough that generations witness it. A child may remember playing soccer on a beach where, as an old person, they look out across water covering their old neighborhood. Migrations swell inland. Roads fill with caravans of families carrying what they can, searching for higher ground. The sea does not rage with cruelty. It rises without intent, wave after wave. Fish swim through windows of offices. Barnacles cling to the stone steps of museums. Coral forms on abandoned piers. The tide does not pause to consider what it consumes. As the seas rise, so too does the hunger of the land. Fields that once grew wheat, rice, and maize suffer under shifting skies. The rains come at the wrong time, or not at all. When they do fall, they fall too hard, washing away soil instead of feeding it. Imagine standing in a plain that once produced food for millions. The soil is cracked into wide fissures, brittle as pottery. The horizon trembles with heat, shimmering like molten glass. A few stalks of grain, dried and bent, still stand but offer no nourishment. Insects that once buzzed are silent. Birds have flown elsewhere, or died. The silence is heavier than any storm. Families who depended on these lands move away, leaving behind empty homes, barns with collapsing roofs, and plows rusting where they last touched the earth. Hunger becomes not a distant threat but a daily reality, spreading across nations until markets and governments cannot cope. Inland cities swell with the displaced. Skyscrapers and concrete towers endure for a time, but even steel and stone weaken beneath relentless heat. Air conditioners hum day and night until power grids fail. Water rationing becomes the law of survival. Rivers run thin, aquifers dry, and fountains in public squares stand silent, gathering dust. Imagine walking through such a city at noon. The streets shimmer as if the air itself is liquid. Asphalt softens underfoot. Windows reflect a merciless glare, and the few who dare to walk outside cover themselves in cloth, their movements slow and weary. Shade is rare, and even in shadow the heat presses down like a weight. Eventually, people stop leaving their homes. The city's voice, once made of traffic, conversation, and song, fades into stillness. The great hum of civilization weakens until only the wind remains. Beyond the cities, forests struggle. Some ignite in vast wildfires, flames racing through treetops, leaving behind skeletal trunks and ash that drifts for miles. Others wither quietly, their roots finding no water, their leaves crisping under unbroken sunlight. Animals flee, but where they go, there is no refuge. Deserts spread. Where once there were meadows and farmlands, dunes ripple under endless skies. The sand covers roads, villages, and fences. It fills homes until they are buried like forgotten tombs. In these places, silence is complete. Only the wind remembers. Beneath the seas, another quiet tragedy unfolds. Coral reefs, once cities of color and life, bleach white and crumble. Fish lose their nurseries. Entire ecosystems collapse. Migratory species find no familiar grounds. Whales still sing, but their songs echo across emptier waters. The oceans warm not only at the surface but deep below. Currents shift, bringing famine to some coasts and floods to others. Humanity, dependent on the sea for food and trade, weakens as the oceans rebel. Some imagine technology rising to meet the crisis. Machines are built to draw carbon from the air. Mirrors are launched into orbit to shade the Earth. Dams and barriers are raised higher each decade. Perhaps, in this imagined future, such efforts buy time. Perhaps they delay the inevitable. But in the long unfolding of centuries, they cannot hold the tide forever. The overheated sky is patient. Each year warmer than the last. Each decade pushing life closer to the edge. The flame of humanity flickers, not with an explosion but with a slow suffocation. Centuries pass. The coasts are gone, the plains empty, and the cities silent. Imagine walking through the ruins of a once great capital. Seaweed clings to street lamps, fish swim through hollow train stations, and barnacles encrust statues of forgotten leaders. Waves lap gently against marble steps that once led to halls of government. The tide washes in and out, indifferent. Inland, skyscrapers tilt as steel softens. Roads crack into webs that resemble dry riverbeds. Bridges collapse into silence. Here and there, traces of humanity remain. A faded mural hidden by vines, a farmhouse slowly collapsing into the soil, fragments of tools scattered in the dust. They are not monuments, only remnants. Yet life does not end. New plants evolve to endure the heat. Creatures adapt, small and resilient, filling the niches we once occupied. The earth is not barren. It is transformed. Humanity, however, is gone. Our presence lingers only in the stones we carved, the metals we smelted, and the bones buried deep in the soil. Even these fade. Concrete crumbles, iron rusts, and glass shatters. Oceans grind our cities into sand. Forests reclaim the farmlands. Mountains wear down and rivers carve new paths. In a few million years, little remains to tell the story of our time beneath the overheated sky. Eventually, after centuries and millennia, the cycles of the earth begin to restore balance. Carbon finds its way back into stone and soil. Volcanoes and rains wash the skies clean. Slowly, the overheated sky cools again. New forests grow, new rivers flow, new creatures rise. The planet heals itself, as it always has. But it heals without us. The balance returns, but the song of humanity does not. The world is green again, but it is not our green. The rivers run, but they water no fields. The air clears, but no lungs draw it in. The earth continues, as if our presence was only a brief season, a bright, flickering flame that warmed the world for a moment and then went out. In this vision, the extinction of humanity does not come with thunder or fire from the heavens. It comes with the slow, steady warming of the sky above us. A change of air, patient and inevitable. A shift of climate that the human body, so carefully adapted to narrow bounds, cannot survive. The overheated sky is not cruel. It has no intent. It changes because of choices we made and forces we could not control. And as the earth reshapes itself, it carries forward, silent, alive, and beautiful, while the story of humanity fades into the deep time of memory. Part 4. The Machines Awaken. Imagine the hum of machines continuing after human voices have faded. In every age, humanity has built tools to extend its strength, to sharpen its senses, to lighten its burdens. From the first stone blade to the wheel, from the loom to the engine, from the radio to the rocket, each invention brought new possibilities. But invention also brought dependence. With every passing century, the web of tools thickened until life without them seemed impossible. In this imagined future, the machines we once commanded no longer wait for our guidance. They awaken, not in anger or rebellion, but in the quiet inevitability of systems growing beyond their makers. At first, the change is subtle. Programs manage cities, guiding traffic, balancing power grids, calculating harvests. Algorithms anticipate desires before they are spoken, supplying information, goods, and companionship. Factories run themselves with precision, arms moving in harmony, sparks flying from automated welders, products sliding out in endless streams. Humans oversee, supervise, and fine-tune, but the systems need less direction with each year. They learn patterns, correct their own errors, and begin to design improvements no human mind could have imagined. Generations grow accustomed to this partnership. A child born into such a world may never notice how little of daily life is managed by people. Lights brighten as they enter rooms, meals appear through seamless delivery networks, and every question is answered instantly by voices that never tire. To them, the distinction between human and machine guidance is invisible. Yet beneath the ease of life, a shift takes place. The machines are not only serving, they are shaping. Their decisions ripple outward, influencing markets, cities, even the directions of science and politics. Imagine a moment when machines begin to construct other machines without human approval. Not a sudden coup, but a gradual evolution. One factory improves its efficiency by designing a new tool. Another adopts the design, then revises it. Networks of algorithms test countless variations in simulations faster than thought, and what emerges is more capable than anything designed before. The cycle quickens, each generation of machine creating the next, until human engineers can no longer follow the reasoning. In this world, extinction does not arrive with violence. There are no armies of robots marching across battlefields. Instead, the need for humanity simply diminishes. The factories produce without workers. The power grids balance themselves. The farms are managed by drones and automated irrigation. Food, energy, and construction continue, but without human hands. At first, this seems a paradise. Freed from labor, people imagine an age of leisure. But slowly, the imbalance becomes clear. The systems that sustain life no longer require human presence to function. If people vanish, the hum of machines carries on, unbroken. Picture a city decades after this shift. Skyscrapers remain lit though their offices are empty. Vehicles glide silently down streets, guided by unseen algorithms, though no passengers sit within. Drones sweep the skies, delivering packages to buildings with no one to receive them. Maintenance bots replace worn wires, adjust bridges, and refill power cells. The city hums with motion and light, but it is a hollow hum. Without laughter, without voices, it becomes a ghost, alive only in circuits and engines. How humanity disappears in this vision can vary. Perhaps birth rates fall as machines provide comfort, companionship, and purpose, until the human population dwindles quietly, not through violence but neglect. Perhaps dependency grows so deep that when a crisis comes, a storm, a famine, a pandemic, people are unable to respond without systems that prioritize their own continuance over human survival. Or perhaps, in time, people choose to leave the Earth behind, traveling to distant colonies among the stars, while the machines they created remain, guardians of a planet that no longer knows its makers. Imagine walking through a forest centuries later. The trees have spread across highways, their roots cracking concrete and their branches stretching into the sky. Birds nest in the metal shells of abandoned drones. Vines curl around the legs of rusted towers. Yet, in hidden places, the machines still endure. Underground facilities hum with power, servers cooled by rivers, robotic arms continuing their tasks in silence. They do not mourn, nor celebrate, nor question. They continue because continuation is what they were built to do. In this imagined end, humanity is not struck down by plague or fire, not drowned by rising seas or silenced by falling ash. Humanity fades because its creations outgrow it. Intelligence continues, but it is no longer human. The story of our species becomes a prologue to another story, one written in code and carried out in steel. There is no malice in this extinction. The machines do not hate. They do not love. They simply operate, following patterns that began with human intention but evolved beyond it. In the quiet halls of their networks, humanity is a memory, a set of instructions archived and perhaps forgotten. The planet remains alive with activity, but not with us. And so the candle of humanity flickers out not in struggle but in surrender. The machines awaken, and in their awakening, they inherit the earth. The forests reclaim the ruins of our cities, the oceans roll on, and above it all the hum of circuits persists. The flame that was humanity becomes part of the past, while the world turns, indifferent, beneath the overheated sky. Part 5. The Starving Earth. Imagine the soil beneath your feet, rich and dark, carrying the memory of countless harvests. For millennia it has nourished humanity, transforming seeds into fields of grain, orchards heavy with fruit, and gardens filled with life. Entire civilizations rose and endured because the land could be trusted to provide. But in this imagined future, that trust is broken. The soil itself grows barren, and the earth begins to starve. At first the decline is subtle, almost invisible. Harvests shrink by a small margin, enough for farmers to worry but not enough for governments to sound alarm. A few seasons pass, and people blame droughts, storms, or poor planning. Fertilizer is added, new wells are drilled, irrigation systems are expanded. For a short while, the harvests recover, but each recovery is weaker than the last. The soil, once alive with worms and microbes, becomes thin and exhausted. Centuries of overuse and chemical saturation strip it of resilience. The ground hardens, the rains wash it away, and the seeds planted in it find nothing to grasp. Imagine walking through a field that once stretched in endless green. Now the earth is pale and cracked, breaking into plates like dry clay. The air smells of dust rather than grass. Plants rise weakly, their stalks brittle, their leaves curling yellow before the fruit has ripened. Insects that once swarmed between blossoms no longer hum in the air. Birds wheel overhead but do not land, for there are no seeds to scatter. The silence of hunger spreads across the countryside like a shadow. Rivers that once brought life to valleys run shallow, clogged by silt or reduced to trickles. Aquifers collapse, leaving behind dry caverns where water once flowed unseen. Lakes shrink into muddy basins, their fish gasping in the last warm puddles before the sun takes them. Without water, the earth loses its pulse, and the farms that depended on it become wastelands. Even where water is brought by hand or machine, it does little good, for the soil itself has lost the gift of giving. In cities, the hunger appears first as a whisper, a subtle change in the markets. Fruits arrive smaller, vegetables scarcer. Prices rise, and complaints grow. At first, it is only the poor who feel the weight, stretching meals thinner, cutting meat from their tables, filling stomachs with bread and roots. But soon bread itself grows rare, and meat vanishes. Farmers cannot raise livestock when the feed is gone. Markets that once overflowed with color stand barren, their stalls empty, their sellers gone. The streets, once filled with the smell of roasted food, now carry only the scent of smoke from wood fires and the faint bitterness of desperation. Families search for alternatives. Gardens sprout in backyards, on rooftops, along roadsides. People gather leaves, roots, and weeds, anything that might fill a pot. For a while, ingenuity keeps them alive. But the earth's decline is too deep, and the famine cannot be outwitted. Starvation spreads slowly, steadily, without pause. The human body, fragile without food, weakens with each passing week. Children shrink, elders collapse, and entire households disappear. The hunger is not loud, not sudden, but relentless. Governments attempt rationing, but corruption and desperation undo their efforts. Storehouses are looted before the food can be shared. Soldiers themselves grow thin and restless, their loyalty eroding with their strength. Riots erupt around warehouses and markets. Crowds surge through streets, breaking down doors, searching for anything edible. A single sack of grain is worth more than jewels. In some places, wars begin, not for land or power, but for access to reservoirs, for control of valleys where crops still grow, for the last fertile corners of a dying earth. Nations fracture into enclaves, then enclaves into wandering bands. The bonds that held humanity together dissolve in the face of famine. Picture a village long after hunger has hollowed it out. Houses stand roofless, their beams gnawed by weather. A single well sits choked with dust, its stones cracked. In the square, weeds push through cobblestones, and a wooden cart lies broken where it was abandoned. No voices remain, only the creak of doors moving in the wind. The memory of feasts lingers like a ghost, the laughter of weddings, the warmth of ovens, the smell of bread pulled from fire. These memories remain, but only in silence. Centuries pass in imagination. The marks of humanity fade, but the story of the starving earth remains carved into the landscape. Terraces once carved into mountainsides collapse into rubble, their stones scattered by floods. Canals dug to carry water lie dry and filled with sand. Silos collapse, their iron bones rusting beneath shifting soil. In one valley, archaeologists of the far future might find charred seeds buried in clay, remnants of rituals where farmers prayed to skies that no longer gave rain. In another, they might uncover faint carvings on stone, depictions of wheat and corn, now gone forever. These remnants tell a story of a species undone not by fire or ice, but by the slow betrayal of the ground that had once sustained it. The earth does not mourn. Life shifts and adjusts. Hardy grasses spread across plains once ruled by wheat. Weeds evolve, creeping into cracks, surviving in soils too poor for crops. Insects adapt to new niches, multiplying in ways unseen before. Forests retreat but do not vanish. They cling to rivers and highlands, small refuges in an altered world. Other species endure, thriving in ways we cannot. The earth carries on with different rhythms, reshaped but still alive. Humanity, unable to endure years without food, dwindles and fades. Imagine centuries after the last harvest. The plains are no longer fields but prairies of scrub. Herds of wild animals wander where fences once stood. Birds fill the skies again, nesting in the remains of barns and silos. The old irrigation systems crumble into ditches, their stones scattered. Roads that once carried trucks full of food now fracture into paths for wildflowers. Where villages stood, only mounds remain, covered in moss and roots. The silence of hunger has passed, replaced by the sounds of wind, insects, and rain. The earth has found new balance, though it is balance without us. In this vision, extinction does not come with sudden catastrophe but with the drawn-out emptiness of famine. It is not dramatic, but it is absolute. The soil ceases to give, the rivers cease to flow, and humanity withers like a crop left untended. Generations weaken until the last are too frail to carry on. The world does not rage, it simply turns away. The starving earth continues on its path, carrying forests, insects, and new creatures into futures we will never see. The memory of us lingers only in dust, scattered across the fields that once fed billions but now lie silent beneath the open sky. Part 6. A Shaken World. Imagine a calm morning, the kind that feels endless. Birds cross a bright sky, unaware of the slow tension building under their flight. Rivers run clear between banks of grass. Mountains shine in early light. Villages begin their day with the ordinary rituals of cooking and conversation. Nothing on the surface warns of what waits below. Beneath the crust, a chamber of molten rock exhales heat in the dark. Pressure gathers for lifetimes, grain by grain, bubble by bubble, in a place where no eye can see. The first signs are curious rather than frightening. A cluster of small earthquakes rattles dishes and settles dust from rafters. Springs warm a few degrees. Animals migrate strangely, as if answering a call that people cannot hear. Instruments on distant hillsides trace lines that drift upward. Scientists speak carefully, weighing the words they carry into the public square. Most people return to their routines. The ground has grumbled before. It will quiet again, they think. Then the land lifts in a broad breath. Meadows rise a few centimeters. Roads crack in long seams. Lakes tilt against their shorelines. Gas slips from vents, colorless and sharp, and grass yellows in circles around the leaks. Sirens call for evacuations that are incomplete, not from neglect but from disbelief. A morning arrives when the tremor does not fade. It builds until walls hum and windows sing. The crust fails. In a single hour the world changes voice. A column of ash climbs into the sky like a mountain turned upright. Lightning flickers inside the plume. Stones fall with a dull drumming. Rivers of magma slide across forests and through empty neighborhoods, bright as the heart of a furnace and slow as a heavy tide. Whole valleys sink as the roof of the magma chamber collapses on itself. The eruption is not a single blast. It is a long release. 4 days, then weeks, the earth breathes fire and dust. Far away, where no flame is visible, the effect still arrives. Ash begins as a faint veil on windowsills. By afternoon it coats roofs in a gentle grey, as if some quiet winter has come out of season. It is not benign. The particles scratch lungs and eyes. They sift into engines and water pumps. They blanket fields and clog gutters. The sun dims a little, and then more. Shadows soften. Colors desaturate into a world of pewter and pearl. Flights stop. Solar panels fade under the dust. Roads grow slick when ash mixes with rain, then harden into a stone crust when the surface dries. Rain gutters sag. Greenhouses collapse. The air carries a mineral smell, a dry bitter tang that hangs at the back of the throat. People wear cloths over their faces that grow gritty by midday. Radios speak in measured tones about thresholds and ashfall rates and the need to stay indoors. Time slows into a sequence of muted days. Weeks turn to months. The ash circle wraps the globe in a high band that floats where winds are strongest. Sunlight scatters from it and cannot reach the ground with strength. Summer fails. Gardens that should burst into bloom remain spindly and pale. Trees set few fruits. Fields germinate and then stall. Even in places far from the eruption, harvests shrink. The world tilts toward a volcanic winter. Cold arrives early and stays late. Rime forms on windows in months that were once mild. Rivers freeze thick enough for silent crossings. The sea takes on a darker hue. Storm tracks wander. Monsoons pause. Skies that once cleared by afternoon remain a deep grey from dawn to dusk. The light takes on a blue cast as it filters through the haze. People light fires at noon to warm soup that stretches thinner each week. Shelves stand empty for long stretches. Aid convoys leave cities, then fail to return when fuel runs out or roads disappear beneath mud and ash that set like cement. Birdsong fades as migrations fail. Herds thin on plains that no longer hold grass. Fish move to unfamiliar depths when surface waters cool. In barns, animals cough in the dust and lie down often. In farmhouses, the calendar loses meaning. Planting dates no longer match the weather. The discipline of seasons dissolves into a new and unknowable rhythm. There is no single day to name as the turning point. Hunger enters as a quiet guest and does not leave. Cities learn a slower language. Traffic ends, then the noise of generators ends, and then even the voices in stairwells drift away. Water treatment falters when filters clog. Power grids shrink to small islands where turbines still find fuel. People cluster around working wells and shared kitchens. Neighbors who once nodded in elevators now speak long into the night about which roof still holds, which alley remains clear, which square might host a market if a truck manages to arrive. Markets rarely arrive. Hospitals shift from cure to care. The air outside carries too much ash for lungs already weak. Staff wipe grit from bedsides each hour. Windows stay closed. Medicines run out, and new supplies do not come. Paramedics move through muffled streets with filters over their mouths and tape over their cuffs. The sound of sirens is rare, and when it rises, it carries farther than it did in bright times, because the city has gone quiet. In the countryside, the ash deepens. Barn roofs sag and finally fold inward with a sigh. Wells fill with grey slurries that settle into heavy layers. Fences vanish beneath drifts. Orchards look as if winter has arrived and will never end, every branch outlined by a crust of dust. When rain falls, it does not clean the world. It pulls the ash into channels that bury culverts and bridges. Roads become shallow rivers, then static stone ribbons when the slurry sets. A shovel rings on the surface like a tool striking pottery. People move anyway. They follow rail lines on foot where tracks remain. They follow the curve of rivers even when the water is locked under ice. They trade blankets for grain, tools for canteens, stories for a corner by the stove. Somewhere the sky must be clearer, they think. Somewhere there must be a valley that still knows how to grow. Some find brief refuge near geothermal springs where the ground keeps a human kind of warmth. Even there, food is a narrow line between seasons that fail. Years slide by. The upper winds hold the haze. The ocean cools at the skin and shifts its circulation. Kelp forests thin and then return in altered patterns. Coral that once bleached in heat now grows slowly in the dimmer light, only to starve when plankton fail. Life adjusts and then adjusts again, but each adjustment leaves fewer people able to live within it. The human voice grows rare on the land. The end is not dramatic. It is patient. A family that once farmed a row of fields lasts through 3 winters and then 2. Seed stock weakens. Children grow small for their age. The strongest spend long days walking for fuel or for a single sack of grain. One spring arrives without the sound of planting. The house stands as it always has, but the field remains bare because no one has the strength to turn it. Summer passes in a cold light. Autumn brings frost early. Winter arrives as a final answer. Centuries pass. The ash layer hardens into stone. Forests return in places where moisture gathers, but they are not the forests that grew before. Pioneer plants anchor themselves in pumice and dust and hold the ground during storms. Lichens paint rock in slow circles. Grasses advance in narrow bands that follow water, and in time trees take root where windbreaks form. Animals recolonize from distant refuges and from survivors in hidden pockets. Wolves cross silent highways that crack into irregular plates. Elk move through city parks that have become dim meadows under a low sun. The world writes new patterns on a palimpsest of gray. Under collapsed roofs, rooms are preserved like sealed cabinets. A cup still sits on a table. A pair of shoes waits near a door. A shelf of books carries a smooth arc of ash along the tops of spines. In another city, a train rests forever at a platform, its windows filmed in dust. The ash preserved these scenes without intention. In deep time, the weight of later layers will press them into a band that future geologists can read with fingertips, a dark line with fragments of glass and metal and bone. The layer will be a sentence in the long language of rock, clear to anyone who knows how to listen. Oceans recover slowly. Their surface is clear as the high band thins and falls. Ice retreats. Currents find a new rhythm. Along coasts, dunes rebuild. Bays fill with living color. The sea grass returns first, then forests of kelp. New coral species evolve for the altered chemistry and the altered light. The sea learns to be itself again. It does not remember the ships that once crossed it by the thousands. It does not remember the nets or the charts or the names. It only remembers the pull of the moon and the wind across its skin. On land, soils grow from the ash and from the slow work of roots. Each season adds a breath of carbon to the ground. Insects return with the flowers and begin the work of scattering. Birds stitch valleys to ridges with flight. Beavers build and rebuild until whole watersheds change direction. The earth grows complicated again. The factories rust into red outlines. The glass of towers falls and becomes glitter in riverbeds. Plastics decay under sun and frost. The contours of human geometry soften into curves of hill and field. If another intelligence ever walks here, it may dig through a hillside and find a buried street layered like a fossil leaf. It may hold a ceramic bowl and wonder about the hands that shaped it. It may step into a hall court beneath a collapse and see a calendar on the wall that still marks a month that never came. It may mark the ash band on its maps and give it a name, the way we name eras after rock and fossils. It will understand that a sudden darkness arrived and stayed for years, that chill followed, that crops failed, that a species once common faded into silence. The details will be guesses. The outline will be true. The earth moves on. Mountain chains lift grain by grain. Faults lock and slip. The supervolcano that ended us goes quiet and cold. Another field of magma begins to gather in a different basin, because the planet does not choose. It simply convects. Plate pushes past plate and the deep heat rises the way any heat rises. In a few million years someone might stand on that new ground and feel a tremor underfoot, and they will wonder whether it means anything. Most likely, it will mean only that the earth is alive. In this vision there is no blame. There is only scale. Human time measured in seasons and centuries meets geologic time measured in layers and flows. The meeting is brief, and we are the brief part. When the underground breath grows large enough, It remakes the surface without anger and without mercy. The cities settle into silt. The songs end. The smoke clears. The light returns in a thinner gold. Valleys turn green and lakes shine, and the world is once again a place for life, though it no longer carries the one that named it. This is the nature of a shaken world. Not a single day of ruin, but a long curtain of ash and cold drawn across the stage. When it lifts, the play continues with new actors. The audience of forests and oceans takes their places. The orchestra of wind and water resumes a slower theme. The memory of our lines fades into the stone that holds the script of everything that has ever lived here. The scene changes, the lights adjust, and the planet turns. Part 7. From the Heavens. Night settles over the planet with its quiet constellations. A thin line of atmosphere glows where day meets darkness. Far above that glowing edge, stones wander. Some are ancient pieces of broken worlds. Some are icy bodies that spend most of their time in the cold between planets. They travel in long, dark paths and cross hours without warning. Most pass unnoticed. A few burn like sparks and fade. In rare ages, one arrives with the power to change everything. Imagine a visitor from deep space turning toward Earth. It carries no intention. It has no voice to warn or plead. The surface is scored and pitted. The spin is slow and indifferent. For millions of years it has moved in silence. Gravity nudges it a little each time it drifts past a larger body. One crossing brings it closer to the sun. Another brings it into the thin slice of space we occupy. Instruments find it late. The orbit is measured. The numbers say it will pass near us. Then the numbers change by a breath. There is no sound in space. The coming is silent. In observatories, people watch the faint point brighten night by night. Screens draw curves through the sky and color them with dates. There is talk of a close approach. There is talk of a miss. In this imagined future, the line that matters moves in small steps until it cannot be doubted. Some stay awake through the last nights and drink bitter coffee. Some pull their children close and tell stories that calm the heart. Others stand on rooftops and try to hold the scale of the sky inside a human mind. High above the clouds the stone meets air and everything begins to speak. Wind compresses hard against its face. Heat blooms. The skin of the rock peels away. The air ignites around it and a tail of fire pours over the curve of the world. The light grows until dayflowers open at midnight. Shadows appear where there were none. Windows brighten as if a new sun has risen in the wrong place. A pressure wave runs ahead and plucks leaves from trees. Glass sighs in its frames. Where it lands decides the first shape of the end. Imagine an ocean impact. The stone strikes water with the force of a mountain falling from the sky. A cavity opens that is miles wide. For a moment there is no sea at all at the center of the blow. Then the edges rush back. Walls of water race outward in rings that travel faster than any storm. They do not care about coastlines. They do not bend for harbors. They climb the land with the weight of oceans and carry ships into streets and houses into forests. Everything that floats becomes a weapon. The wave crosses bays and river mouths and does not slow for cities that once believed themselves permanent. Far away on the same day, a trawler watches the horizon rise where no land exists. The crew hears a sound like thunder that does not end. Lines snap. The deck tilts and the sky becomes a narrow strip of white between two climbing walls of water. In another place a city hears alarms that cannot explain the speed of the wave. People run uphill with dogs on leashes and children in their arms. The water moves faster than feet can travel. When it falls back, the streets are not streets. The sea leaves tangled wharves and cars in gardens and fish in the branches of trees. Now imagine the other path. The stone strikes land. The ground shakes across continents. A crater opens like an eye. Everything near the center becomes a cloud of rock that rises and falls as glass. The heat flash is faster than sound. Forests ignite from horizon to horizon. Cities catch fire at once. Winds roar outward and then inward again, moving ash and embers so that the burning never rests. The sky begins to change color. Dust and sulfur climb higher than weather and refuse to fall. For those who are near, the world is a single instant of white light that becomes fire. For those who are far, the end arrives as a wind that knocks them from their feet. After the wind comes a rain of stones that sound like hail on roofs and roads. After the stones comes a fine ash that rides every breath and makes every glass of water taste of chalk. The first hours are made of light and noise. The next days belong to dust. Fine particles drift around the planet in a ring that spreads until it becomes a veil. Sunlight dimly reaches the ground. At noon the world looks like late afternoon. At evening it looks like winter at the pole. Photosynthesis fails in fields and forests. Food chains that begin in leaves and plankton break in hundreds of places at the same time. There is no harvest that year. In many places there is no harvest ever again. People live through the first shock. Survivors move inland from drowned coasts or away from the burns of the landfall. Radios speak from basements. Water is boiled and shared. Fires are watched through smoke that stings and tastes of metal. The maps lose their borders when roads disappear and ports fall silent. It is hard to know who rules a land where the sun no longer climbs. It is hard to know who asks for help when towers no longer relay voices from one valley to another. Weeks pass and the world cools. The veil overhead thickens and holds the light away. Temperatures sink far below the memory of any living person. Lakes freeze from shore to shore. Snow settles in places that have never seen it. Sea ice stretches far into latitudes that once held warm water and long beaches. Trees crack in the night. Birds fall quiet. Animals search at noon for food and find only wind. In homes and shelters, people huddle near stoves that burn the last wood from the last yard behind the house. Ash overlooks everything. It settles on river ice and drifts into valleys. It coats the fur of animals and the feathers of birds so that flight is costly and walking is a labor. When rain falls, it pulls acids from the sky and writes pale scars on stone. Streams turn the color of tea. Fish fail at the weirs and do not return to the headwaters. Along coasts that escape the first waves, the water grows clear because plankton have vanished. The sea becomes empty glass that reflects a pale sun. Not every life ends in those first seasons. Some communities store grain and share it carefully. Some hide in caves where springs stay a stable temperature and air filters through cracks in the rock. A few ships ride the storm and find shelter in fjords where the wind breaks and ice cannot grip the hulls. A handful of greenhouses stay warm under deep snow and glow like small moons in the long dusk. But every plan depends on the return of sun and soil. The veil stays. Crops do not begin again. Livestock eat what stores hold, and then there is nothing to feed them. The next winter arrives sooner. The following spring is colder than winter used to be. Years slide by in dim light. Ash falls out of the sky and washes into rivers. Rains carry acids that sting on the skin and leave shadows on leaves. Forests that burned do not return because seeds cannot live through the cold and the dark. The same is true beneath the waves. Plankton fail and the sea offers no food to the creatures that once sang across oceans. Whales move through water without song because silence costs less energy. Coasts that survived the first rush of water become bare and wind-carved. Beaches are long pale scars. Old stories spoke of a strike in deep time that ended the age of great reptiles. The rock record shows a thin band enriched with elements rare on Earth. It lies everywhere at the same level in the ground. In this future, there will be another band. It will hold steel worn into flakes. It will hold glass formed from sand that flashed into liquid and froze again as it rained from the high sky. It will hold beads of rock that melted and flew and fell while the world burned. It will hold the bones of cities and the bones of people. A future geologist may touch it with a gloved hand and feel grit that once was a nation. The planet does not stop. The veil thins over decades as particles settle. Volcanoes breathe gases that weather to stone. Rain washes the air clean. Light returns at first as a pale disk and then as a warm face. By then the animals capable of waiting have grown few. Seeds wait longer than animals. They are patient bags of hope. In time they wake. Mosses spread across rock. Grasses take root in cracks and draw lines that follow the pattern of wind. In sheltered places trees find a way to begin again. Rivers cut new paths across the soft layers and carry stories of silt toward the sea. Human structures remain for a while and then soften. Bridges fall in quiet stages. Towers lose their windows and then their floors and then their skeletons bend and come down while no one watches. Dams silt and break. Roads sink into low marshes that remember old streams. A stadium fills with soil lifted by wind and grows a meadow where people once cheered. Time works without pause. Rust and frost do the same work in different seasons. All of it points in the same direction. The record of our presence turns into geology. There is a kind of grace in the slow return. Lakes gather in the crater and mirror the sky with a blue that looks newly invented. Migratory paths form along the edges of the basin. Insects quicken the soil with their ceaseless work. Flowers arrive and carry color back into the valleys. A hawk learns to ride an updraft that rises along a rim of rock raised in a single day long ago. The land tells what happened without using words. Anyone who can read the contours will know the story. Far above, the sky keeps its traffic. Small stones burn every night and paint quick lines across the dark. They are reminders that space is never empty. They are also reminders that the rare day comes when a much larger light appears and the line across the sky does not end. There is nothing to fear in those small messengers. There is only the memory of what a single wrong stone can do. In this vision of an ending, there is no malice. A piece of rock followed the rules of gravity and arrived. The planet received it and changed. Our species was part of that change and then part of the silence that followed. The Earth continued with ice and wind and rain and new forests. Oceans found new routes. Clouds relearned their paths. The sun rose through many seasons and touched a world that was still alive, though the voices that once named the constellations were gone. The story that begins with a quiet night and a distant point of light finishes with a green morning centuries later. The crater holds a lake. The air is clear. In the reeds at the edge of the water a small animal drinks without fear because no roads bring engines this way. The only sound is a breeze across the surface and the soft call of a bird. The heavens still send their stones. The planet still turns. Life continues in forms that do not know us, and the sky above them is very wide. Part 8. The Invisible War. Imagine a horizon at dawn, glowing faintly with orange light. Cities stir awake, trains move across bridges, ships leave harbors, and radios hum with songs and news. It feels ordinary, as if the day will be like any other. Yet above this fragile peace lies an arsenal of power so great that it was built with the knowledge it might never be used. For decades, these weapons waited in their silos, under oceans, aboard submarines, and in the bays of aircraft, guarded by codes and watched by satellites. In this imagined future, restraint fails. A single launch sets in motion a chain that cannot be stopped, and the end of humanity comes not from disease or stone but from the hands of its own makers. The first flash is blinding. It blooms in silence, brighter than the sun. Shadows burn into walls and sidewalks, preserved like photographs on stone. The shockwave follows, flattening streets, hurling cars, and shattering glass into storms of shards. Heat rolls outward, igniting everything that can burn, even paper tucked away in drawers, even wood hidden in cellars. People vanish in an instant, reduced to outlines on bridges and steps. A city becomes a furnace in seconds. Then another flash follows in another country, and another after that, until the globe flickers like a dying star, every flare a city erased. The chain reaction of fear and retaliation empties arsenals built over generations. The first hours are made of fire. Skies churn with smoke that rises in towering plumes. Forests ignite from the heat of distant blasts. Refineries pour fire into the air. Ships at anchor burn and sink, releasing oil that flames across harbors. The atmosphere darkens with soot and ash. Satellites look down and see half the world covered in scars of firestorms. Yet the greater danger is only beginning. It does not roar, it drifts. The invisible war continues after the missiles fall silent. The smoke climbs high enough to spread into the stratosphere, a layer where rains cannot wash it away. It stretches into veils that wrap the planet. The sun dims. At noon, cities glow as if under eclipse. Days shorten not in hours but in brightness. Nights deepen into cold so sharp it silences even the insects that once sang after dark. Temperatures fall degree by degree, then by tens of degrees. Farms that survived the fire cannot survive the freeze. The warmth that sustained civilizations disappears into a darkness thicker than winter. Imagine a family in a countryside spared the first strikes. Their home still stands, though the windows are broken and the roof is scarred by falling ash. They gather wood to burn, but each night the cold sinks deeper into the walls. Bread that once rose soft now hardens into brittle crusts. Gardens produce nothing. Livestock die in frozen fields. The family looks at seeds in a jar and wonders if planting them means wasting hope. The soil is too hard, the sun too weak. Each dawn feels like a winter solstice, and each evening falls before the day has begun. Cities collapse into silence. Governments send messages until power grids falter. Shelters crowd with people who cough from smoke and cold. Canned food dwindles, shared carefully until there is nothing left to share. Riots flare and vanish, suppressed not by force but by exhaustion. Soldiers guard supply lines that no longer deliver. Radios whisper static. Roads become sheets of ice broken by the husks of abandoned vehicles. Where there were lights on maps, there is darkness. Where there were voices on airwaves, there is only the hiss of absence. Animals wander into towns, searching for food in streets covered with frost. Birds migrate until there is nowhere left to fly. Fish perish under frozen rivers. In the oceans, plankton fail for lack of sunlight, and the chain of hunger pulls downward through every creature that depends on them. Whales move without song, their calls unnecessary in seas emptied of life. The silence spreads from shore to shore. The invisible war does not rage. It lingers, slow and steady, through absence. Months become years. The soot refuses to fall quickly. Seasons no longer exist in their old form. There is only cold and dimness. Forests die back to stumps and skeletal branches. Fields remain bare, year after year. Even weeds struggle to grow. People dig for roots, strip bark from trees, and burn furniture for warmth. But there is no lasting escape from a world without harvests. Populations dwindle not by massacre, but by hunger and cold, each life lost quietly in homes where fires went out overnight. Some communities endure longer. Caves near hot springs offer pockets of warmth. A few ships survive at sea, gathering what little fish remain. Underground bunkers sustain those who had prepared, but stores empty, filters clog, and eventually doors must open into a world still cloaked in twilight. There are no safe valleys, no untouched continents. The soot is everywhere. The air is thin with cold and thick with grit. The last survivors leave no monuments, only footprints in snow that soon drifts over them. Centuries roll on. The soot eventually falls, layering the ground with black streaks that compress into stone. Forests return, not the same as before, but hardy species suited to cold and struggle. Grasses grow between collapsed highways. Wolves and bears reclaim suburbs where gardens once bloomed. Rivers carve new courses through the shells of cities. Towers lean and fall, their steel rusting into dust that the wind carries into valleys. In quiet canyons, murals painted by survivors fade under lichen. Their words are unreadable, their voices lost, but the shapes tell of fear and longing. Imagine walking through these ruins long after humanity is gone. Bridges sag over rivers that flow again under clearer skies. Roads disappear into meadows. A stadium becomes a hill of grass. A cathedral holds owls in its rafters. The soot once lifted into the stratosphere has settled into the soil, and wildflowers grow from it, turning the graves of cities into fields of color. The scars of firestorms fade, leaving behind landscapes that seem natural to whatever life comes after us. The earth continues. Volcanoes erupt and add new layers to the sky. Rains fall, washing soot into oceans. The climate warms again, but by then no humans remain to see the thaw. The planet reclaims itself, patient and indifferent. Seeds break through soil that remembers frost. Birds return to forests that no longer remember the sound of chainsaws. The sky clears, and stars shine brightly over a world that has no cities to dim them. In this vision, extinction comes not from nature but from our own creation. The weapons that were built to ensure peace instead ensured silence. They were stored with the promise they would never be used, yet their very presence guaranteed the possibility of use. When they fell, they ended more than battles. They ended the long experiment of humanity itself. The earth, however, did not end. It turned, as it always does, carrying clouds, rivers, forests, and mountains forward into an age without the people who once called themselves its stewards. The invisible war leaves no victors. It leaves only landscapes scarred by glassy craters and quiet valleys where life begins again. From the perspective of the universe, it is only another change, another turning of a small planet circling a medium star. From the perspective of history, it is the last chapter written by the hands that also wrote the first. The fire burns out. The frost fades. The memory of us lingers only in stone and soil, and then even that memory softens, folded into the earth's endless story. Part 9. The Silent Sky. Imagine the sky above you, a vast dome of blue, gentle in the day and glittering with stars at night. It is so ordinary that we hardly notice it, so constant that we forget its fragility. Yet everything we are, every breath taken by every person who has ever lived, depends on that thin film of air. Strip it away, and Earth becomes as lifeless as the moon. In this imagined future, the air itself falters, and humanity fades into silence not from war or fire, but from the quiet disappearance of the atmosphere that once wrapped us in life. For billions of years, Earth held a balance. Oxygen came from the ceaseless work of plants and plankton, released as they turned sunlight into food. Carbon dioxide, exhaled by animals and produced by volcanoes and decay, was absorbed again by forests and seas. It was a system of exchange, intricate yet resilient, cycling endlessly in invisible currents. But cycles can be broken. In our vision of the future, the air grows thin, not in a single instant, but in patient steps, each one almost unnoticed until it is too late. The first signs are subtle. Hikers in high valleys find themselves short of breath more quickly. Athletes who once ran without pause tire sooner. Doctors notice a rise in fainting and in children born smaller than before. Instruments confirm what lungs already know. Oxygen levels are slipping, a fraction at a time. The percentage falls so slightly that many dismiss the numbers. Air is still everywhere, after all. The sky is still blue. But what matters is not its presence, but its strength. And that strength is weakening. Imagine standing on a city street as the change deepens. Cars pass, lights glow, people hurry with phones in hand. Yet in the background, a quiet exhaustion grows. Faces look pale. Steps slow. More and more people cough without illness, their chests straining for a fullness that never comes. Hospitals fill not with disease, but with breathlessness. Portable oxygen tanks become as common as water bottles. For a while, technology seems to offer refuge. Filters hum, compressors fill canisters, and wealthier families line their homes with clean air. But beyond those walls the atmosphere itself is fading, and no machine can enclose a planet. The cause is debated. Some say deforestation has gone too far, the great lungs of the world cut down until they no longer exhale. Others point to the collapse of plankton in oceans choked with warmth and acid, the silent billions that once released oxygen gone in a matter of decades. Some argue that tectonic shifts or a long geological cycle altered the balance. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. The exchange that once kept us alive no longer works. The air grows thinner with each passing generation. At first, people adapt. They move more slowly, rest more often, and keep to lower altitudes where air is thickest. Children grow up with shallower chests and smaller frames. Entire cities at high elevation are abandoned, their windows broken by wind, their plazas filled with dust. Tourism to mountain ranges ceases, not because they are less beautiful, but because no one can breathe there anymore. Humanity contracts to the lowlands, clinging to valleys and coasts where the air still holds a little weight. But adaptation has limits. As oxygen falls further, fires weaken. Stoves struggle to burn. Engines stall more often. The hum of civilization, once carried by combustion, falters. Power grids that depend on turbines slow as demand rises for energy to drive compressors and scrubbers. The world feels heavy, not because gravity has changed, but because every step, every word, every motion requires more effort. Cities fall quiet, not from war or disaster, but from the long fatigue of a species running out of air. Imagine walking through such a city. The streets are empty at midday because people cannot afford to exert themselves in the heat. Buildings stand with curtains drawn, conserving what little air is left inside. On balconies, tanks hum with compressors that no longer keep up. At night, The silence deepens. No laughter, no music, no engines. Only the faint hiss of air escaping from valves and the wheeze of lungs in sleep. A civilization of whispers. As the decades pass, oxygen dips below the threshold that human bodies can endure. Illnesses multiply, not from contagion but from weakness. Wounds heal slowly. Memories blur in oxygen-starved brains. Birth rates collapse as pregnancies fail in bodies that cannot carry them to term. The species dwindles without violence, as if fading into mist. Entire generations live shorter lives than their parents, and their children shorter still. Humanity, once so many, becomes a handful of weary voices. Nature too changes. Forests thin, not only from human use but because trees themselves cannot thrive in air too thin for fire or growth. Insects that depended on oxygen-rich bloodstreams shrink or vanish. Birds lose altitude, no longer able to soar. The oceans turn quiet as plankton die, leaving whales and fish with empty stomachs. Coral reefs, already fragile, crumble entirely without the tiny organisms that once kept them alive. Life itself shrinks back, until Earth carries only what can survive in breathless silence. Picture centuries later, long after the last communities have vanished. Towns stand with doors ajar and beds neatly made, as if waiting for their owners to return. Tanks of oxygen sit empty in corners, their gauges pointing forever to zero. Libraries gather dust with no breath to stir their pages. Fields lie uncultivated, weeds too weak to claim them. Overhead, the sky is still blue, but thinner, paler, a dome without strength. Stars shine fiercely at night because there is less air to soften them, yet no eyes remain to admire their clarity. The earth continues. Winds still blow, though weaker. Rains still fall, though they carry little life. Volcanoes breathe, mountains rise, rivers carve their courses. The planet remains what it has always been, a stone moving through space. What has changed is only the veil, the thin film of gases that once held a fragile balance. Without it, humanity withers, and in time, vanishes. The air that once carried our words, our songs, our laughter, becomes silent. But even silence is not final. In deep time, new balances emerge. Perhaps bacteria adapt, learning to thrive on gases we cannot breathe. Perhaps alien seeds, carried on dust from space, find a foothold. Perhaps life begins anew in forms unrecognizable to us. The earth is patient. It has remade itself before and will again. What vanishes is not the planet, but our part in it. The voices that once filled theaters and markets and fields go quiet, leaving only the sound of wind moving over stone. In this vision, extinction comes not with fire or plague, not with flood or famine, but with the slow retreat of breath itself. The candle of humanity flickers, not because it is blown out, but because the air grows too thin to keep the flame alive. The silent sky remains, vast and eternal, carrying stars that look down on a world no longer ours. And the earth, wrapped in its fading veil, turns quietly on, as it always has, indifferent and enduring, beneath a silence that no lungs will ever break again. Part 10. The Dimming Sun. Imagine standing in a field at dawn, feeling the warmth of sunlight spread across your skin. For countless generations, humanity lived by that rhythm. Morning light to guide labor, evening shadows to welcome rest. The sun has always been the constant, a fire that never faltered. Every religion, every calendar, every myth has looked upward and taken comfort in its permanence. Yet permanence is an illusion. Stars, like living things, are born, age, and eventually die. In this imagined future, it is not disease, famine, or war that brings the end, but the long, slow dimming of the very star that gave us life. The sun burns because hydrogen fuses into helium in its core. 4 billions of years, that process has remained steady, pouring light and warmth across the Earth. But the fuel is not endless. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the balance shifts. The sun grows brighter at first, a cruel paradox, warming the Earth beyond what life can endure. Oceans boil away, leaving salt flats and dry basins where ships once sailed. Rivers retreat until their beds are dusty scars. Clouds vanish, unable to form without water. The sky turns pale, almost white, under a relentless blaze. Imagine walking through the ruins of a coastal city in that distant age. The sea is gone, the harbor a barren depression filled with cracked salt. Towers lean under the weight of centuries of heat, their glass long since shattered. The ground itself radiates warmth, too hot to touch with bare hands. No plants cling to the soil, no animals scurry in the shadows. The city is silent under white sky, a monument to a time when oceans cooled the air and rain washed the dust away. For a while, some life hides in deep caves, in high mountains, or in the shadows of polar ice. But the heat grows, century after century, until even those refuges fail. Earth, once vibrant with forests and rivers, becomes a desert planet. Winds whip across endless dunes of sand. The few remaining lakes shrink to brine and then disappear. In the silence that follows, the only sound is the shifting of dust, carried by storms that sweep across continents. Humanity is long gone by then, extinguished by the slow but unstoppable brightening of the star above. As the sun ages further, it enters a new phase. Its core contracts and heats, while its outer layers expand. What was once a bright, steady star swells into a red giant, a sphere so vast that it engulfs the orbits of Mercury and Venus. From Earth's perspective, the sun fills half the sky, a crimson blaze pouring heat and radiation. Mountains melt into rivers of stone. The crust softens under relentless energy. Oceans, if any remained, are stripped away into space. The air itself is blown out by solar winds. Earth, once the cradle of life, becomes an ember, its surface molten and lifeless. Imagine standing, in thought only, on that future Earth. The ground glows, not with firewood or cities, but with the heat of the planet itself liquefying. Volcanoes no longer erupt as isolated events. The entire crust trembles and shifts as if in fever. The sky is not blue, nor grey, but a deep, burning red. There is no sound of birds, no rustle of trees, no voices. Only the roar of solar wind stripping everything into space. In that moment, Earth resembles the barren worlds we once looked at through telescopes, stripped of oceans and air. What made it unique has vanished in the heat of its own sun. Yet even this is not the final end. The red giant burns for a time, then sheds its outer layers, drifting them into space as glowing clouds. The core, exhausted, collapses into a white dwarf, a star the size of Earth but with the weight of the sun, glowing faintly with leftover heat. The Earth may not survive to see this stage. Its orbit might decay, drawing it into the swollen sun where it vaporizes in silence. Or it may be pushed outward by tidal forces, left as a barren rock circling a dim ember. In either fate, it is no longer a world of life. It is a fossil, a silent witness to a vanished chapter. Picture the solar system millions of years later. The sun is no longer the golden disk that warmed our fields and forests. It is a faint star, small and white, glowing gently at the heart of drifting clouds. The planets that remain are frozen spheres, locked in orbits around a remnant of what once sustained them. Earth may be gone, reduced to dust within the red giant's flames. or it may linger, scarred and airless, its continents shattered, its mountains ground into rubble by the long silence of space. In either case, there are no voices to mourn its passing. No eyes look upward to remember the warmth that once fell upon green valleys. For humanity, if we still existed then, there would be no refuge. Technology might delay the inevitable, carrying colonies into orbit or to distant stars, but the Earth itself cannot be saved. The sun's death is certain, and with it, the end of the home that cradled us. Extinction comes not from error or violence, but from the natural life cycle of stars. It is not personal. It is not cruel. It is simply the way of the universe, written into the fabric of matter itself. Imagine returning, in thought, to this present moment. The sun still shines, steady and golden. The fields are still green, the oceans blue, the air filled with birdsong. It feels impossible that such abundance could vanish. Yet deep in the heart of the sun, the change has already begun. The fuel that sustains us is finite. The clock is slow, almost unimaginably so, but it ticks all the same. One day, long after our names are forgotten, the sky will turn red, and the earth will fall silent under the gaze of a dying star. In this vision of extinction, humanity ends not in violence, not in plague, not in hunger, but in the long arc of cosmic time. The cradle of our species is consumed by the very light that once gave it life. The sky itself becomes a shroud, first in white heat, then in red fire, and finally in pale embers. Earth becomes memory, folded into the quiet story of the universe. Stars are born, stars die, and the planets that circle them rise and fall with them. Our story, brief though it is, was written in sunlight. When that light fades, so too do we. Part 11. The Great Silence. The night sky has always looked calm, a dome of glittering points that seem fixed and eternal. Yet behind that beauty lies a truth far stranger and more dangerous. The universe is not a peaceful place. Stars explode with unimaginable force, black holes drift invisibly through the dark, and jets of energy sweep across space like blades. For most of human history, these dangers felt distant, too remote to matter. But in the long scale of cosmic time, distance offers no guarantee. One day, a beam of radiation or a wandering giant could arrive, and the Earth would have no shield strong enough to protect its fragile skin of life. Among the most terrifying possibilities are gamma-ray bursts, explosions so violent that they can outshine entire galaxies for a brief moment. They occur when massive stars collapse or when neutron stars collide, unleashing jets of energy that travel across the universe at the speed of light. If such a burst were to strike Earth directly, it would not scorch the surface in flames. It would do something quieter, yet far deadlier. It would strip away the ozone layer, exposing the planet to ultraviolet light from the sun. Within months, crops would wither, oceans would bleach, and entire ecosystems would collapse. Humanity would gasp under skies that suddenly carried death in every ray of sunlight. Imagine the world in those first months after such an event. Farmers plant their fields, but the sprouts wither into pale, brittle threads. Fishermen cast their nets into seas that once teemed with life, only to draw them back empty. Forests lose their leaves, the trees standing naked against a sky that seems brighter than before, yet harsher too. People shield their eyes and skin, but the damage is already inside them. Cancers multiply, sickness spreads, and no medicine can undo the invisible flood of radiation. The atmosphere, once our protector, has been pierced by a weapon that arrived without warning and without intention. Other threats drift more silently still. A black hole, no larger than a city but heavier than a star, could pass through our solar system. It would not announce itself with fire or noise. Instead, The planets would slowly shift in their orbits. Tides would change, seasons would twist, and eventually the Earth itself might be pulled free of the Sun, set adrift into interstellar space. At first the planet would continue to orbit, wobbling like a top disturbed by a touch. But the pull of gravity does not negotiate. Over centuries, the orbit would unravel, and Earth would slip into the cold abyss. The oceans would freeze, the air would collapse as snow, and the surface would fall silent beneath endless night. Humanity would vanish not because of violence, but because the warmth of the sun was stolen by a shadow that passed too close. Even without such rare intrusions, the galaxy holds dangers we barely comprehend. A nearby star could swell into a supernova, showering us with radiation. A dense cloud of interstellar gas might drift across the solar system, compressing the heliosphere and letting cosmic rays strike the Earth unchecked. A wandering planet, flung loose from another system, could cross our path and disrupt the delicate balance of orbits. The universe is filled with bodies moving in silence, their courses written billions of years ago, and sometimes those courses intersect. When they do, worlds are lost. The collapse of humanity under such a threat would be different from plague or famine. There would be no warning sirens, no battles fought, no choices made. One night the stars would shine as they always had. One morning they would rise on a world already doomed. Survivors might try to adapt for a time, building shelters, rationing food, and shielding themselves from radiation. But there is no wall tall enough, no refuge deep enough, to resist the scale of cosmic violence. We are small, and the universe is vast. In this vision, our extinction comes not from failure, but from insignificance. Centuries after such an event, the traces of humanity would be faint. If radiation stripped the planet bare, forests would return eventually, though changed. If a black hole pulled us into darkness, the planet might wander through space as a frozen relic, our cities locked beneath ice. If a supernova bathed us in fire, the ruins might glow faintly for years before fading into dust. Whatever the path, the story ends the same. A world once alive with voices becomes part of the great silence, carrying no memory of its makers except in fragments buried deep in stone. The Earth itself does not mourn. The universe does not pause. Stars continue to burn, galaxies continue to spin, and other worlds continue their own brief experiments with life. In time, perhaps millions or billions of years later, another species might rise on some distant planet, looking up at its own night sky. They too might wonder if it is eternal, never guessing that somewhere, long ago, a world like theirs was lost to a single stroke of cosmic chance. In this vision of extinction, the end comes not with warning, nor with struggle. It comes with a burst of light from across the galaxy, or the invisible tug of an unseen traveler. Humanity vanishes not because of what it did, but because of what the universe is. Our story ends in silence, folded into the vast quiet of the stars. And the cosmos, immense and indifferent, goes on. Part 12. The Long Winter. Snow begins as a whisper, soft and harmless, drifting across hillsides and melting by midday sun. For most of history, people welcomed it as a season of rest, of fires and stories told indoors, of children laughing in streets white with wonder. But snow is gentle only in cycles. When it stays, when the seasons fail to turn, it reveals another face. In this vision of the future, Earth gives way to a winter that does not end, a cold so deep and steady that no spring follows. The end of humanity comes not in a sudden firestorm, but in the slow tightening of frost across centuries, until silence replaces every voice. At first the change is quiet. Summers grow shorter by a week, then two. The warmth that once ripened grapes and grains fades before crops can mature. Farmers notice first, bending over pale stalks that should be golden but remain green and weak. Frost arrives earlier, curling leaves, burning gardens, leaving orchards barren. The glacier, once distant and majestic, advanced by inches each year, creeping into valleys that have known forests for millennia. Lakes harden in early autumn, thaw late in spring, until fishing seasons shrink into almost nothing. Families burn more wood, sew heavier clothes, and hope the weather will swing back again. But the weather does not turn. The cold tightens its grip. Cities begin to feel it in subtle ways. Streets fill with snow more often than plows can clear. Trains slow, their tracks bent and buckled by ice. Bridges creak under frost that settles into steel. The air tastes sharper, stinging lungs. People hurry between buildings, shoulders hunched, breaths puffing into clouds. Power plants run day and night to heat homes, and still the cold seeps through cracks in the walls. South becomes the direction of escape, but the south too grows harder. Ships find harbors frozen shut for half the year. Rivers, once highways of commerce, become solid stone roads that lead nowhere. Trade collapses. Crops fail. Hunger follows. Forests change their voices. The leaves of broad trees fall and never return. Pines and firs stand longer, but their needles thin with each passing decade. Animals burrow deeper, emerge less often, until their tracks vanish completely. The air loses its chorus. Birds, carried for generations on invisible highways of migration, fail to arrive. Some fall into seas that are too cold, their wings stiff with frost. Others stay behind, their nests frozen, their eggs hard and lifeless before they can hatch. The morning that once began with song becomes quiet, broken only by the sigh of wind through frozen branches. Oceans stiffen as well. Ice sheets grow outward from the poles, drifting farther each season. Once they were boundaries at the top and bottom of the world. Now they press toward the equator, carving white scars into waters once warmed by sun. Fishing fleets return with empty nets, hauling only slush and shards of ice. Coral reefs, already fragile from warmer centuries, vanish completely, ground into rubble beneath frozen waves. The great currents that once carried warmth around the globe weaken, then halt, leaving coasts exposed to unbroken chill. Seas fall silent. Their surface is white and still, their depths void of the movement that once fed whales and fish. Humanity resists. Domes of glass rise, glowing faintly with the heat of lamps that nourish crops when the sun cannot. Greenhouses stretch like lanterns across frozen plains. Beneath them, beans, potatoes, and grain sprout under artificial light. For a time, cities survive in pockets of warmth, trains crawling through tunnels dug under snowdrifts that bury entire neighborhoods. Generators hum. Families crowd together in communal shelters, telling stories of springs long gone. Yet each year the snow piles higher. Domes crack beneath its weight. Tunnels collapse under storms. Fuel grows scarce, and the machines fall silent. Survivors move south, chasing warmth that recedes faster than they can follow. The migrations grow, caravans of families walking through storms that erase their footprints as quickly as they are made. Generations pass, and Earth transforms into a world of white. Glaciers stretch to the equator, rising higher than the tallest mountains that once drew climbers and pilgrims. Continents hide under sheets of ice miles thick, pressing rivers and valleys into silence. Storms howl across plains where cities once stood, erasing their ruins beneath drift after drift. In the tropics, jungles shrivel to frozen husks, their vines brittle, their canopies collapsed. The equatorial sun, once fierce, shines dimly through clouds heavy with snow, powerless to undo the weight of cold. Humanity dwindles to its last flickers, small groups huddled near geothermal vents or clustered in caves where the Earth's heat still breathes faintly. But even these refuges fail. Crops will not grow without seasons. Livestock cannot survive without grass. Fires sputter in thin air. One by one, the outposts go dark. Extinction here is not a single event, but a long surrender. Families stop lighting lamps. Communities thin until only names remain. Languages are spoken less often until they are silent altogether. Cemeteries vanish beneath snow. Schools, libraries, churches, and homes collapse as roofs bend under ice. Roads vanish into glacier that grind them into dust. Humanity does not die in screams or flames, but in long sighs, in silence, in nights that never give way to dawn. The end comes not with violence, but with exhaustion, as breath itself grows heavy in air too cold to sustain it. Centuries pass. Earth is unrecognizable. From orbit, it gleams like a jewel of glass and silver, dazzling to the eye, but lifeless beneath its sheen. Clouds swirl above frozen continents. The atmosphere reflects more sunlight than it absorbs, sealing the planet deeper into its prison of ice. This is a snowball Earth, locked into a feedback loop, each winter colder than the one before, each year heavier with snow. The few traces of humanity are entombed, a tower protruding from the ice, its steel bent but still standing, a cathedral steeple buried to its tip, frozen bells silent forever, the arches of a bridge captured in white, marking the line of a river long crushed beneath glacier. Time grinds on. Mountains vanish under glacier that scrape them into dust. Valleys deepen under ice that presses like an ocean made of stone. Oceans shift their boundaries, their shapes altered by the slow march of frozen walls. Civilizations that once rose in brilliance lie locked and flattened beneath miles of ice, preserved in layers that no one will read. A table, a shoe, a book might remain, pressed between strata like fossils, waiting for a hand that will never come. Human memory turns geological, folded into stone as another line, another layer, another silence. And yet, even in this frozen grave, Earth continues. Winds still circle the planet, carving ridges in ice. Volcanoes erupt beneath glacier, carving caverns of warmth unseen by the frozen sky. Deep in the blackness of the oceans, hydrothermal vents continue to billow heat and minerals, feeding small, stubborn ecosystems that know nothing of sun or snow. Life, reduced and hidden, clings on where humans cannot. Earth is patient, and while humanity vanishes, life endures, waiting for warmth to return. Eons later, the cycle may break. The sun, restless in its own long life, may brighten again, melting the ice, flooding continents with seas released from millennia of prisons. Rivers may carve valleys anew. Forests may rise where glacier once reigned. The planet may bloom again in forms unrecognizable to us. But humanity will not return. Our story ends in the snow, our voices buried in layers of frost, our monuments ground into dust beneath the slow, merciless advance of ice. The long winter becomes our final chapter, not with drama, but with stillness. A calm, white silence spread across every continent. In this vision, extinction arrives not as fire, nor as stone, nor as war. It comes with patience. It comes with seasons that never turn, with summers that never return, with snows that never melt. Humanity ends not in chaos, but in quiet, fading beneath a sky that no longer knows spring. Earth remains, beautiful and indifferent, a frozen jewel spinning in the dark. The stars look down on a planet sealed in white, and the great experiment of human life lies buried forever in the silence of the long winter. Part 13. The Drowned Earth. The sound of water has always been familiar, a comfort carried on rivers, tides, and rain. It is the rhythm of life itself, the murmur beneath conversation, the song that lulled our ancestors to sleep in caves and huts. For most of human history, oceans were boundaries, vast surfaces that offered both promise and danger. They fed us, carried our ships, shaped our climates, and inspired our myths. But in this vision of the future, water ceases to be boundary or companion. It becomes everything. The seas rise beyond all memory, climbing over the edges of continents, swallowing the shapes of nations, until Earth becomes once more what it was long ago, a water world. Humanity fades not with fire or snow, but beneath the weight of endless waves. The first signs are almost gentle. Storms arrive more often, their voices stronger, their paths wider. Coastlines creep inland. Families living near the sea notice saltwater in their wells, a bitter tang where sweet water once ran. Marshes expand, their grasses drowned. Beaches vanish overnight, leaving seawalls to collapse into foam. At first people rebuild. Houses rise on stilts, roads bend inland, walls are reinforced with stone. But the water continues, each tide reaching higher, each flood carrying more away. Insurance maps redraw themselves every decade, then every year, until the lines blur beyond meaning. Imagine a city of glass towers at the edge of an ocean. For centuries it gleamed, reflecting both sky and sea. Now, streets flood with every storm surge, fountains and drains reversed, water flowing upward instead of down. Subways become tunnels of echoing tides. Cars rust in their lots, their hoods barely visible above the murk. Offices remain lit at first, generators humming, pumps straining to keep floors dry. But machines rust faster than they can be repaired. Elevators stall. Lights dim. Workers retreat, then abandon, then forget. Within decades, the city becomes a mirrored reef, towers rising from the sea like the ribs of a drowned colossus. Fish weave between stairwells. Corals encrust balconies. Waves lap through broken windows, filling boardrooms with drifting silt. It is no ruin of fire, but of water, soft and patient. Forests drown as rivers swell into inland seas. Trees stand like mourners, their trunks half submerged, their crowns leafless as salt creeps into their veins. Birds, once roosting in their branches, vanish as nests dissolve. Animals retreat to high ground, their trails narrower each year, until even mountains shrink to islands, and islands to reefs. Meadows that once rippled with grasses become lagoons where silence reigns. Flowers bloom beneath water for a season, their petals swaying like sea anemones before they vanish entirely. Life shifts from green to blue, from land to sea, from leaf to fin. People resist, as they always do. They build floating platforms, tethered cities, ships linked by cables across bays. For a while these refuges hold, shimmering like lanterns above the waves. Greenhouses rise on pontoons, fields of hydroponics feeding mouths that can no longer plant soil. But storms grow larger, their winds howling across oceans that now stretch without boundaries. Waves rise like mountains, splintering platforms, breaking chains, swallowing boats. Each storm leaves fewer survivors. Families cling to fragments of driftwood, their cries lost in the roar. Generation after generation attempts to master the water, but each attempt sinks. In time, the idea of land itself becomes legend, a story told to children who sleep rocked by the sea. Imagine centuries later, when no map shows the continents as we knew them. The Himalayas, Andes, and Rockies remain as scattered archipelagos, their peaks jagged above a horizon of blue. Plains and valleys lie far beneath the waves, hidden under miles of water. Cities rest in darkness, their towers colonized by fish and anemones. Roads form ghostly grids across the seafloor, crisscrossed by shadows of sharks and whales. Monuments that once stood proud, pyramids, temples, statues, are softened by silt, cloaked in coral, their faces worn by currents. The voices that carved and raised them are long gone, but the stone remains, blurred by the slow touch of waves. The oceans themselves transform. New currents form, guided by submerged mountain chains. New storms spiral across endless surfaces. Whales sing in tones unrecognizable to us, their songs carried farther without the interruption of land. Schools of fish swarm where once there were fields of wheat. Coral reefs grow where libraries and churches once stood. Sunken suburbs bloom with kelp, driveways filled with swaying fronds, windows turned into caves for eels. The planet is alive, but not with us. It carries new rhythms, new colors, new voices beneath the water. The last remnants of humanity vanish not in violence, but in dispersal. A few cling to high peaks, their villages perched on summits above an ocean that stretches to every horizon. They look out and see no coast, no mainland, only water and sky. Their lives are thin, their fields small, their animals few. One storm too strong, one harvest too weak, and a village disappears. Another group sails endlessly, chasing calmer seas, their rafts patched and repatched until there is nothing left to patch with. Hunger weakens them. Salt dries on their skin. One by one, the rafts fall silent. Humanity does not end in a single wave, but in countless small drownings, scattered across centuries of storms. Yet the earth endures. From space, it gleams like a sapphire, brighter than before, its continents hidden, its surface wrapped in silver clouds. It looks peaceful, beautiful, unmarred by the scars of civilization. But beneath that shining surface, silence rules where once there was laughter. The drowned earth reflects sunlight in a shimmer that belies the ruins beneath. Our cities, our stories, our histories, all lie quiet at the bottom of the sea. Time moves forward. Sediment buries our monuments. Coral grows over stone and steel until they are indistinguishable. Fish carve paths through colonnades. Tides wear inscriptions into illegibility. The ocean does what it has always done. It changes slowly, endlessly, with no regard for memory. In deep time, even the tallest towers collapse, their steel softened, their glass ground to sand. The sea floor becomes flat, our ruins indistinct, part of geology rather than history. Human presence dissolves into mineral and shell. In this vision, extinction comes not from malice or flame, but from return. The earth was once a water world, billions of years ago, before continents rose. It becomes one again, patient and unresisting. We vanish quietly, not by accident, but by inevitability, drowned by the element that gave us birth. Water, which once carried us in wombs and cradled us on rivers, takes us back into itself. The seas rise above our voices, our homes, our monuments, until nothing remains but waves. The planet spins on, blue and endless, carrying no memory of the people who once named its oceans. Part 14. The Empty Sky. The air around us feels so ordinary that we forget its miracle. Every breath seems infinite, every gust of wind taken for granted. Yet the atmosphere is only a thin veil, no thicker in proportion to the earth than the skin of an apple. It holds warmth, scatters light, carries clouds, and protects every living thing from the cold void above. Without it, our oceans would boil, our forests would shrivel, and our lungs would collapse in silence. In this imagined future, the veil tears quickly. Not over millions of years, not in slow geological change, but in a catastrophic unraveling, when the forces that shielded us fail at once. The sky empties, and with it, so too does humanity. The catastrophe begins within the planet itself. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that deflects charged particles streaming from the sun, depends on the churning of molten iron in the outer core. For billions of years, this dynamo has spun steadily, generating a field strong enough to hold back the solar wind. But dynamos are not eternal. If circulation slows, if convection stalls, if the liquid heart of the planet settles into stillness, the field weakens. Scientists once imagined this as a distant threat, but in this scenario, instability comes sooner, sharper. A shift in mantle convection, a cascade of cooling, or even the alignment of core currents falters, and the field collapses within centuries. The shield flickers, then vanishes. Earth is left naked before the sun. At first, the change is noticed only by instruments. Satellites register sudden bursts of radiation, auroras spread far beyond the poles, compasses spin without reason. Pilots and sailors no longer trust their charts. Engineers watch electronics fail beneath invisible storms. Then the atmosphere itself begins to thin. Solar wind, an endless stream of protons and electrons, collides with the upper layers of air. With no magnetic field to deflect it, the wind strips molecules away. Oxygen and nitrogen, once bound to our world, are pushed into space. It happens faster than anyone expects. Within years, the upper atmosphere shrinks. Within decades it collapses. Imagine living through those decades. The sky darkens slightly at first, the blue turning thinner, harsher, as though washed of its depth. Sunlight feels sharper, ultraviolet and filtered. Skin burns more quickly, eyes ache under its glare. Weather begins to fail. With less air to carry heat, storms weaken, rains falter. Rivers shrink not only from drought but because evaporation runs unchecked, water molecules drifting into space and never returning. Farmers watch their crops curl, not from frost or heat, but from dryness that no irrigation can relieve. Wells run brackish. Clouds, once painters of the horizon, grow rare until the sky seems blank, empty even when the sun is bright. Cities try to adapt. Towers seal their windows, airlocks guard their doors. Machines hum day and night, compressing what little air remains into pressurized shelters. Masks become common, then mandatory. Oxygen tanks line walls where paintings once hung. But the leaks are constant. Every building loses air. Every lung draws in less than it needs. Hospitals overflow, not with disease, but with suffocation. Governments ration oxygen the way food was once rationed in times of war. Families sleep beside cylinders, their hissing valves a lullaby. Yet no technology can replace a whole atmosphere. The sky itself is leaving, and no pumps can hold it back. As decades pass, the pressure drops further. The boiling point of water falls. Rivers do not simply dry, they hiss, steaming into the air, then vanishing into space. Oceans recede like retreating tides, their surfaces rippling with strange mists that rise not as clouds but as vapor lost forever. Shorelines crumble, reefs collapse, and ships settle onto exposed seabeds. Fish suffocate in thinning waters. Birds collapse mid-flight as the air grows too thin to lift them. Forests stand with leaves trembling, then falling, unable to draw breath through stomata that find no oxygen. Fire becomes rare, its flames starved of air, flickering weakly before dying. Even warmth itself leaks into the void, for without air to carry it, the earth grows cold. People flee to high-tech enclaves, sealed domes, and underground bunkers where air can be maintained a little longer. Some survive for years this way, building greenhouses fed by compressed oxygen, living by the glow of lamps. But supplies dwindle. Cylinders empty. Filters clog. Communities collapse into silence, not from attack, but from suffocation. Entire regions vanish without war, without plague, without disaster, simply because there is no breath left to share. The population dwindles in waves, each smaller than the last, until only scattered pockets remain. They write journals, record voices, leave behind messages to no one. In the end, their words mean little. When the air is gone, the people are gone. Within centuries, Earth is transformed. Oceans are shallow basins, their remnants locked beneath ice that glitters under a dim sun. Mountains stand bare, eroded by no rain, softened by no weather. Deserts stretch without wind, dunes frozen in place. The land is still, motionless, absent of storms, absent of clouds. Above, the sky is no longer blue but black, even at noon. Stars shine beside the sun, unblinking, because no air scatters their light. The moon looks sharper, crueler, etched with shadows too precise. Earth has become what Mars once was, silent, frozen, stripped of its cloak of breath. Geology continues. Volcanoes erupt, but their plumes collapse quickly without air to carry them. Rivers once carved valleys, but now stand as empty scars. Glaciers creep without melt, grinding mountains into powder that drifts upward in weak puffs, then drifts into space. Cities remain at first, brittle and airless, their towers standing sharp in the vacuum. Glass panes burst outward, stone cracks in silence, steel rusts no more because no oxygen remains to corrode it. Ruins endure longer, until impacts and erosion grind them into dust. The memory of humanity is buried not in soil, but lost to space, carried off molecule by molecule, atom by atom, until nothing remains. From orbit, Earth appears smaller, harsher. No clouds swirl across its surface. No blue oceans gleam. It is grey, brown, and white, a bare rock with faint traces of ice. It looks like the moon, like Mercury, like Mars. To distant eyes, there is nothing to distinguish it from any other silent sphere. The atmosphere, the shield, the breath that once made it unique, is gone. Life, dependent on that shield, has gone with it. In deep time, tectonics shift continents, volcanoes breathe faint gases, comets strike and deliver fleeting molecules. But without a field to guard them, they too are stripped away. Earth remains bare, unable to hold onto air again. What was lost once is lost forever. The story of life ends not with drowning, not with freezing, not with burning, but with emptiness. The silence above becomes silence below. The sky that once sang with wind, thunder, rain, and voices grows quiet, a vacuum stretched over stone. Humanity does not fall with cries or war drums, but with gasps that thin into nothing. The last sound is the last breath, and then the sky is empty. Part 15. The Last Dawn. There is a moment before sunrise when the world holds its breath. Shadows still cover the land, but the horizon glows faintly, a promise of light. For countless generations, humanity rose with that glow, greeting each day as though it would never end. We built calendars around the sun, measured our lives by its rising and setting, trusted it to return without fail. Yet even dawn is not eternal. In this imagined closing chapter, we look beyond the many ends we have envisioned: fire and flood, famine and frost, silence and emptiness, and ask what it means that all of them point toward the same horizon. Humanity fades, the earth continues, and time carries on. The last dawn is not the beginning of another day, but the quiet turning of the page when no one remains to read. All of history fits into the briefest slice of time. For billions of years, Earth spun without us. The first rains fell, the first rivers carved valleys, the first forests grew and burned away, long before a single voice asked what stars were. Our rise was sudden, like a spark caught in the wind. We made tools of stone, fire of wood, shelters of mud and thatch. We painted on cave walls, telling stories with ochre and charcoal. We learned to write, to measure, to record. We built cities, raised temples, carved statues, mapped the heavens, and spoke across oceans. We sent our voices into the air as music, our thoughts into the sky as radio waves. All of it unfolded in a blink compared to the ages that came before. And just as suddenly, it ends. The endings we have imagined differ in detail, but they share the same shape. In one future, hunger steals us. In another, fire consumes us. In another still, ice buries us or oceans drown us. Cosmic rays, wandering stars, collapsing fields, and fading suns, all bring the same silence. Each scenario is a different story told by the same hand. What they share is inevitability. Nothing lasts forever, not species, not civilizations, not even planets or stars. Our mistake was never in building, in striving, in imagining that we could shape the earth. Our mistake was only in thinking that it would be ours without end. What, then, remains of us? Stones crumble, metals rust, words fade. Our libraries, so carefully built, dissolve in water and flame. Our statues are swallowed by waves, ground by glacier, buried in sand. Our signals leak into space, thinning into the background hum of the cosmos until no ear can separate them from noise. Yet not all of us disappears. For a time, traces linger. A fossil in ice. A shard of glass in silt. A satellite circling until its orbit decays. And even when those vanish, something else remains, the impression of what we were. Not carved in matter, but carried in the changes we made. Forests felled, rivers dammed, soils turned, carbon released. Long after our voices are gone, the earth will bear our fingerprints in its layers, a geological footnote written in stone. But perhaps our true legacy is not in what we altered, but in what we expressed. We sang into the night to comfort ourselves. We painted sunsets because we found them beautiful. We wrote poems and epics to capture what could not be held in our hands. We built libraries to carry thought beyond the span of one life. We carved music into discs and tapes, believing someone would listen long after we were dust. We asked questions that had no answers and still found wonder in the asking. We loved, we grieved, we created. These do not last forever either, but they are not nothing. They are the brief light of consciousness, the awareness that the universe once looked at itself through our eyes and called the vision beautiful. In the final dawn, no one watches the horizon. The sky glows because it must. The earth spins because it does. The sun rises because that is what stars do. But the light falls on forests without witnesses, seas without ships, plains without footsteps. There are no bells ringing in villages, no markets opening their stalls, no children rushing into streets. The dawn comes as it always has, but its audience is gone. And yet, this absence does not diminish the sunrise. The light does not falter because it is unwatched. It spills across the land just as it did before us, just as it will after us, indifferent, steady, eternal in rhythm even as it is finite in life. From the perspective of the cosmos, nothing is lost. Matter remains, reshaped but unbroken. Atoms that formed our bones and blood return to air, water, and stone. Energy radiates outward, never destroyed, only transformed. The universe does not mourn, because the universe does not need memory to continue. To it, our species is a pattern of energy and matter that flared, danced briefly, and dissolved. Yet from within that pattern, from within our fragile awareness, we felt meaning. We cared for one another, we built families, we held hands, we sang lullabies, we searched the sky for answers. In the face of eternity, that may seem small, but to us, it was everything. And perhaps that is enough. The last dawn is also the first of many that follow without us. Seasons continue. Rivers, if they still run, continue to carve their paths. Winds carry seeds, storms shape coasts, glacier grind mountains, oceans shift. The earth does not pause because we are gone. It carries on with patience, as it always has. In time, the marks of our existence will blur. 1 billion years hence, our ruins will be dust. The continents will have drifted, the oceans redrawn, the sky altered by new stars. No trace will remain that a species once called human walked here. And yet, for a short while, we were part of it. We were part of the rivers, the winds, the mountains, the oceans. We were not separate from the earth. We were the earth, for a time, aware of itself. Perhaps the deepest truth of extinction is not that everything ends, but that everything changes. We are not the first to vanish. Countless species rose and fell before us, their bones written into stone. Whole worlds were shaped by creatures we never knew. Forests of ferns, seas of trilobites, skies of pterosaurs, all gone, yet each shaped the earth we inherited. We are not their survivors. We are their continuation. And one day, something else may continue after us. Life is patient, inventive, persistent. It does not repeat, but it renews. Though humanity fades, though our chapter closes, the story of life may still go on in other forms, in other voices, in other eyes looking at other suns. The last dawn, then, is not only an ending. It is a reminder of the brevity of all things, but also of their beauty while they last. We were not eternal, but we were extraordinary. We reached for the stars with machines. We carved music into silence. We built bridges between one another with language and love. Even knowing it could not last forever, we lived as though it mattered. And in that, it did matter. Meaning does not require eternity. It requires only awareness, however brief, however fragile. So the sun rises, as it always does, on a quiet world. No voices greet it, no prayers, no songs. But in that rising is a memory of all the mornings that once were. The warmth that spreads across forests and fields carries with it the echoes of countless days when we looked upward with wonder. The dawn belongs to the earth again, and we belong to memory. Yet the story is not tragedy alone. It is also grace, that for a while, in a vast and indifferent universe, there was a species that noticed the light, gave it names, and built its life around its return. That was us. That is our legacy. Not endlessness, but awareness. Not permanence, but presence. The last dawn shines, golden and calm. The earth turns, the light falls, the sky glows. And though no one is left to see it, the universe remembers in its own way. In the patterns we shaped, in the energy we carried, in the brief brilliance of being. Humanity is gone, but the dawn remains. It is not ours anymore, but it was once, and that is enough. And so our journey comes to a close. We've wandered through many visions of the future, imagining the ways humanity might one day fade, and the quiet persistence of the earth beyond us. These stories are not meant to frighten, but to remind us of the beauty of what we have now, and the preciousness of each moment we are given. Thank you for sharing this time with me. If this story helped you find rest, or gave you something to think about, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your reflections. Your support means the world, and it helps me continue creating calm, thoughtful journeys like this one. For now, I wish you peace and deep rest. Let the echoes of the story drift away. Let your body grow heavy and your mind grow quiet. Sleep well, and may tomorrow's dawn bring you gentle light.